What's going on, everyone? One thing I love doing, as you guys know, is looking back and forth and looking at new phones, older phones, phones that aren't even existing yet. That was really weird English. And basically seeing what you should get. Now, I call this series Still Worth It. I didn't invent this series, but I love looking at older technology and seeing what they have to offer now. Now, I've already done this video earlier this year of the LG G6, and I pretty much stated, it has a lot going for it. But some things have changed. We've seen the LG G7 be released. We've seen a new Android version. So let's go ahead and see how this phone holds up in the later part of 2018. Now, starting off, the way this phone looks, I kind of like it, Obviously, it's kind of in that weird spot of like having a huge screen but not being quite bezel-less, which is kind of funny because LG used to be the one person in like the phone industry that had the slimmest bezels. If you guys remember the LG G2 that had pretty slim bezels, no fingerprint sensor or home button on the front, all the buttons were on the back, which was really unique. On this case, the phone, I would say, is almost bezel-less, but not really. The screen to body ratio is actually 78.6%, so it's not the highest, but it's really not that low either, and it's pretty respectable. The screen is actually 5.7 inches. It's a 1440p panel, and I honestly think it's pretty decent. It's on the better side of things. I mean, the only thing that's even slightly wrong with it is that it is an IPS panel. I really wish it was like an OLED panel. That would have been way better, especially on a panel like this with all that screen, but I mean, it is what it is. You can't go back and change it, but I really wish LG put an OLED panel on it. That would have been awesome. Now, this phone also has IP68 dust and water resistance, which is just like one more reason to pick up a phone. I mean, if your phone does not have any water or dust resistance, like you're already taking an L so early on in the life cycle. On the back, we do have a dual camera setup, and I'll get into that in a second. And you also have a fingerprint sensor on the back as well. Kind of going back to the front of this phone and turning it on, you are presented with Android 8.0 Oreo, and it still has not gotten Android 9.0 as of yet. It did start off getting Android 7.0, and I thought as of this point it would have gotten Android Pie by now. And I don't know, I haven't really seen any news of it getting it or not. I really hope it does because I feel like this phone can easily handle it. But that is kind of something you kind of have to wait in the future, and I guess we just have to wait now. But one thing to keep in mind is that this is kind of crazy for me saying it because this isn't even that old of a phone, but there probably is a custom ROM community out there, and you can possibly root this phone and throw a custom ROM on it if you want to. Now, I'm not saying you have to. I'm not even saying that's a good idea, but it is that option. But LG does put their UI over it. They call it the LG UX UI. I don't really like it. I mean, I just like, give me stock Android, why do you gotta like put all this stuff in your phone? Samsung does the same thing, but they recently just switched to One UI, which is actually a pretty smart thing, so they can stop branding their thing as TouchWiz because that kind of has a bad name with it. One UI is actually much more cleaner, but LG UX UI, I mean, it's honestly not bad. I've liked it in the past. They keep it pretty minimal. I remember like LG G3 had it, and LG G4 I believe had it too, and obviously all LG phones had it, but I just remember predominantly on the LG G3, and it was pretty decent. Here, I mean, I just feel like nothing can really compare to stock Android, so I'll just probably keep it at that. In terms of the specs inside of this phone, it does have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 821. It has a quad-core CPU and an Adreno 530 GPU and 4 gigs of RAM, which is pretty respectable. Those are some pretty respectable specs, and I found that this phone is pretty decently speedy. It can handle anything you throw at it for the most part, whether you're multitasking or going in between like huge heavy apps. I mean, you're probably not going to run into too many problems. Now, if you do go and like try to game with like 50 apps in the background, yeah, you can probably slow it down, but as a decently spec'd phone, I think it can handle pretty much anything you're going to throw at it. Like I said, gaming is perfectly fine too. I don't really run into too many problems with games on phones that came out like after like maybe 2016. So this phone is definitely a decent phone in that, but I think the performance on this phone is definitely a good thing. That's a common thing. Now, it does kind of, because it does have kind of a glass back, it does heat up a little bit. I've noticed phones with glass backs heat up more than like phones with plastic backs. I have no proof to back that up, just personal experience. But I do kind of find that that's the case most of the time. But I mean, it is what it is. Phones are going to heat up their electronics. Now, switching to the back, I want to talk about the camera really quickly. It's a pretty good camera, It's a dual camera setup, and they're both 13 megapixel sensors. So there's a standard lens, and then there's actually ultra wide lens as well, which is really, really cool. And it just allows you to get more into a photo. And if it was between, I really wish like iPhones, I guess they have ultra wide kind of now. Before, they didn't really have an ultra wide lens, and I really was hoping they would bring it into some time. And I think the LG G6 did a really, really good job at it, just because it allows you to get so much more in a photo, and it's optional. It's not like you have to use it if you don't want to. You have that option of enabling it or disabling it. And I don't know if the LG V20 or V30 had it. I'm sure the V30 had it. I don't know if the LG V20 had it. I mean, we'll have to take a rain check on that and get back to you about it. But I definitely think that the camera, especially the back camera, is very, very good. You're able to shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, which is kind of sad. You know, I really was hoping 4K at 60 frames. You know, we have phones that can do like 4K at like 120, I'm pretty sure. And the sad thing is it can only shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second, which is pretty crazy. I feel like this phone could have definitely handled more, but it is what it is. I mean, the iPhone like 6S can shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second, I think. So, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird. The front camera is 5 megapixels and it's decent. I mean, I don't really like front cameras that are less than like 8 megapixels on Androids. For some reason, it always looks like they're super pixelated, and whenever I take a Snapchat with one, it just doesn't look that good. With iPhones, kind of different, but with Android, especially with LG, their back cameras are usually pretty decent, but their front cameras are just always a little like weird sometimes. Now switching to something that's actually pretty decent, it'd be the battery life. It has a 3,300 mAh battery. You do have things like wireless charging, so you can easily wirelessly charge it, no problem there. It does take USB Type-C as well, so you can easily pop in a USB Type-C charger and just charge on your way. Overall, I do think battery life is pretty decent. Like I said, LG's UI doesn't really bog down the memory too much. There's been cases where sometimes the background activities and things like that with LG's UI are pretty crazy, but I do think that as a whole, the screen, it's not really like too powerful of a phone. I mean, it doesn't have like 8 gigs of RAM. It doesn't have like the craziest chipset or anything like that. It's a very like normal phone in a way. I don't really see too many people like hyping this phone up or like talking about it too much, but I mean, it is what it is. I think the battery life in terms of everything is pretty decent, and I think it's like a middle of the road kind of thing. You know, you're not going to be super surprised, but you're probably not going to be disappointed either. You're probably going to be like seldomly charging your phone by the end of the day, but not really. I mean, if you have a really tough day and you're using your phone a lot, it's a little different, but if you're just like seldomly using it here and there and you're listening to music, this and that, you can probably get through a day, but I wouldn't really expect more than a day out of this thing. Now, some other super cool notable things to note. This one in particular, it does have a micro SD card slot, which is pretty interesting. I don't see a lot of phones still keeping it. I see a lot of phones getting rid of it, which is kind of annoying. That's definitely cool. This, the Galaxies, OnePlus actually, they never put in a micro SD card slot in their phones, which was weird. I think the OnePlus X had it, but they never put one in after that, which is kind of random. I really wish they did incorporate it a little bit more, but it is what it is. Like I said, this thing is IP68 dust and water resistance. Another funny thing is that this thing kind of does have an always on display. You can enable it or disable it, but it's so weird because it does have an IPS panel and it's not an OLED panel. So that's kind of, I mean, why didn't they just put an OLED panel on it, you know? And overall performance was pretty decent, and this phone does have wireless charging as well. So would I go and recommend people to go buy the LG G6 in the later part of 2018? What I'll tell you is that this phone is definitely worth it, okay? I'm not saying it's not worth the money or anything like that, but what I'm going to say is that if you even plan on spending over $200 on this phone, I would probably tell you to wait. You know, this phone, as of this point, is not going to get any more expensive unless it just randomly becomes rare or something like that. I would say this phone has a place, but it's not on like my top list of like phones to recommend to people, you know? Especially, you're probably going to end up buying it used for the most part. I mean, if you buy it new, I guess whatever, go ahead and buy it. But if you plan on getting it used, I mean, there's some other options you can get out there for around that $200 mark, even if it's a little bit less. I mean, I've seen like Google Pixels 2s go for a little bit more than this. I mean, even the original Google Pixel XL, which doesn't look as good as this thing, I'll give you that. It doesn't have a micro SD card slot, but it is a overall better phone in my opinion. You're getting an OLED screen, you're getting software updates, you have a huge ROM community behind it as well. The LG G6 seems like a phone that I would recommend to somebody who just like, hey, I need to get a phone. What should I get? Like, I need to go to Best Buy and pick one up. I'll be like, if you want to save some money, get an LG G6, I guess. But I don't see this phone being on my top list of like recommending to people out of the blue, in any situation really, whether you want a used or a new phone. I don't see anybody getting an LG G6 right now. I would 100% recommend people, hey, if you want something, go get a Galaxy S9, go get a Galaxy S8. You can probably get an S8 for around the same price as LG G6. You can even probably find, like I said, a Google Pixel 2 maybe for the price of LG G6. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I mean, I'm not saying the G6 is a horrible phone or anything like that, but I do think that there's some phones out there that are just better than this phone. And it's kind of weird to say because the G6 is a very good phone. I actually like LG a lot. They have a lot of weird things though, boot looping issues and everything. I had an LG G2 as my main phone a couple years ago. I actually started this YouTube channel when I had the G2, which was pretty cool. I liked it a lot. I had it for a little bit over a year. It was a really good phone. I liked it. Then I ended up having a boot loop problem a little bit, but I ended up having touch disease as well, so it was like the best of both worlds. So I would recommend people, if you need to get a G6, get it. If you have a G6 now, I mean, keep it. It's a good phone. I'm not saying it's not, but as of right now, I definitely think there's better options out there for you to get, and I don't see the G6 being one of those phones, like I said, that I just like recommend people to buy. So if you want, I'll leave a link to an LG G6 in the description below if you want to buy it for some reason, but also leave a Google Pixel 2 link down there, and also like a Galaxy S8 if you want it, or Galaxy S8 Plus. I feel like those phones are a overall much better value than LG G6, and that's really all I have to say about it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. I want to know what you guys think though. Do you think the LG G6 is still a very good value? Do you think it's not? Do you think there's better phones like I think? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. But definitely hit that like button. Every single person who likes this video means so much, and it really helps me know, do you guys like these videos? Do you not? Also hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count too, so it would mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the links in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel that is also linked down below. I would really appreciate it so much if you guys could go and subscribe to this channel. That would mean so much, but also subscribe to that channel too. Links down below. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.